When African opened his laptop that day in his army tent, he could not have imagined that his life would change forever with just one email. He was in Kandahar, in the middle of the harsh desert, where every day was a challenge. Every time he went on patrol, he felt like he was fighting not only the enemy, but also the thoughts in his own head. But all those hardships could not prepare him for what was about to happen. She wasn't waiting anymore. That was the message in the email he received from Michelle. There was no resentment, no explanation, just the end. Attached in the PDF were divorce papers, along with a notice that Michelle had moved her new boyfriend into their home in Spokane. She had withdrawn all the money from their joint account and was no longer waiting for him to return. "Be safe. Grow up about it," was the last line of the email, which African couldn't help but read over and over again, even though he knew it was inevitable. But no matter how prepared he was, the sense of loss and betrayal still hit him like a hard blow. Everything he had sacrificed for his family, the years away from home in the army, it all came crashing down in an instant. He didn't have time to be angry. It was just a fleeting emotion, leaving him empty. He didn't react immediately. Instead of replying, he closed his laptop and walked into the shared bathroom. Under the cold water, he tried to calm the chaos in his mind. When he returned to bed, without saying a word to anyone, he just lay there, staring at the ceiling and thinking about what had just happened. Wilson, his roommate, noticed that something was wrong. But like any other soldier, he didn't ask much. Wilson knows that sometimes silence is the only way to keep things from falling apart. After receiving information about Michelle's betrayal, African knew that he couldn't let things sit like this. He wasn't someone who would give up easily, and he wasn't someone who would let others invade his life without doing anything. However, he didn't rush into action. Instead, he started to monitor what Michelle was doing. Michelle had started to change a long time ago, but African didn't want to face it. He thought that his job, the long business trips, might be the reason why she felt distant. He tried to talk to her, but every time he called her from Kandahar, the stories she told about her work only made him feel more distant. The long silences when he returned home also made him clearly feel the change in her. But he didn't want to believe it. He didn't want to see that change as a sign of the end. Looking back, he realized that those signs had appeared a long time ago. She stopped asking about his day, stopped making time for simple conversation. She started going to the gym 3 times a week, though she never broke a sweat. She had a new password on her phone that he was never allowed to know, and he noticed that she no longer cared about what he did on his long trips. Though he didn't want to confront her, African began collecting important documents, things he didn't want to lose. He filed away his house deeds, his birth certificates, and military documents that he knew would be valuable if things went south. He also opened another bank account and transferred a portion of his paycheck into it, enough to ensure that if anything happened, he wouldn't have to start from scratch. One night before he left for deployment, Michelle hugged him tightly at the airport, said goodbye, and told him to be safe. But he didn't feel the warmth from her. Her eyes held no worry, no love that he expected. Her words were more like she was speaking to a colleague than to a husband about to go to war. This feeling, although he had felt it for a long time, was now clearer than ever. When he returned to the United States after a 4-month deployment to Kandahar, African did not tell Michelle that he was going home. He wanted her to not know about his return, and given what had happened, he decided not to give her a chance to explain. He checked into a small hotel in Spokane, far from the house they had lived in. Shortly after his arrival, he contacted James, his old army buddy who had become his lawyer. James was the only person he could trust in this legal battle. James provided him with all the necessary documents and the next steps to take in order to fight Michelle. When James showed him the documents related to Michelle taking out a large loan from the bank, he could not believe what he was reading. Michelle had used their joint account to take out a loan to refinance the house. Even though African had not signed any of the papers, the feeling of betrayal became more and more obvious when African realized that Michelle had not only betrayed him emotionally, but also financially. "She not only lied to me, but also tried to take everything I had," African said, angry but also a little helpless. "She did it all without any explanation." James, his loyal friend, nodded. "We will not let her get away. We need to be fully prepared before facing her. African began to secretly follow Michelle and her boyfriend Brian. He had no intention of confronting her directly, but only wanted to collect clear evidence. The security cameras he had installed in the house before leaving for work helped him capture important footage. One day when he checked the security camera footage, he saw Brian walking his dog in the driveway, and Michelle was laughing in the kitchen having fun with him. It was a scene African could not forget. It was the moment he realized that, in addition to betraying him emotionally, Michelle had done something worse. She had completely abandoned him. The emotions he felt at that moment were no longer anger, but coldness, the sobriety of finding a reasonable strategy to deal with it. He knew that he could not wait forever. He needed to act. With all the evidence in hand, African decided to call the FBI to report the situation. The agents began to investigate. Within hours, the agents began to move in. The people involved in the case were not limited to Michelle and Brian, but also included Daniel Spencer, the real estate agent who had helped Michelle carry out the fraudulent transactions. FBI agents Patel and Donovan worked with African to investigate all of Michelle and Brian's financial transactions. Testimonies, copies of documents, and conversations on security cameras gradually helped them build a larger financial fraud pattern that not only African but many other military families were victims of. Throughout this process, African did not say a word to Michelle. He decided to let the truth speak for itself. His decision was that there was no need to confront, no need to scream or beg. He just wanted to let her know that her actions would not go unnoticed. As the FBI investigation began to reach a critical stage, African felt the tension rise. He could not help but feel nervous, even though he had prepared everything carefully. Every time as he met with James to discuss the next steps, he realized that this legal battle would not be easy, especially since Michelle, despite her involvement in financial fraud, had people on her side. However, nothing could stop African's determination. He had spent many years serving in the military, and he had no intention of stopping in this battle. Michelle's betrayal, deception, and intrigue had changed him. He was no longer the man of the past, who always devoted himself to his family without thinking about himself. He realized that sometimes life requires difficult decisions, and one of those decisions was to protect yourself from everything. As his case continued to be investigated, the truth gradually came to light. The FBI discovered that Michelle had not only forged African's signature to borrow money, but that she was also involved in a larger conspiracy that involved many other military families. This made things even more complicated, serious. People like Brian, Daniel Spencer, and others in the real estate system have taken advantage of soldiers serving far from home, taking their assets with clever tricks. Every call from the FBI makes African feel a little relieved. He couldn't imagine the severity of what Michelle did. What he didn't expect was that she had teamed up with a group of people who specialized in illegal transactions and selling properties at below market prices. Other military families have been affected by these fraudulent practices, and every time African hears their stories, he becomes more determined to solve the problem once and for all. "We won't stop until everything is cleared up," Agent Patel said in a phone call African received after a week of investigation. "Thank you for doing this, but I can't stop here. She's hurt too many people," African replied, his voice hardening. A month later, as the case progressed, the FBI agents had enough evidence to begin prosecuting Michelle and her co-defendants. African didn't need to do anything more. Everything was settled, and now he just had to wait to see the results. One morning, as he sat in his hotel room, a surprise call came from the FBI. Agent Patel informed him that all the assets had been frozen and would be redistributed to the defrauded military families. This was not only a relief for him, but also for everyone else in a similar situation. "Thank you for your patience," Patel said over the phone. "We will continue to follow up on the case and make sure that everyone involved is prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." African sat quietly in his room, feeling as though everything had been settled, but there was still a void in his heart. Even though he had gotten justice, what had happened still weighed heavily on him. Life with Michelle could not be the same again. She had chosen to go her own way, and now he had to start over. However, deep down, African knew that this was an important step. He could not live in the past, no matter how painful and difficult it was to accept. He needed to find a way to move on, and with the case solved, he could start a new chapter in his life. After the case was over, African decided to sell the old house where he and Michelle lived together. It was not an easy decision, but he knew that he could not continue to live in a house filled with memories of betrayal. The house, with all the painful memories of a broken marriage, now became a part of the past that he had to cut off in order to move forward. With the money from the sale of the house, African bought a small cabin on the outskirts of Missoula, Montana. A house with not too many people coming and going, just the space and quiet he needed to start his life over. In the following days, he found peace in his carpentry job, a simple but meaningful job. He no longer wanted to do the stressful work in the army, and now he wanted to spend time on the things that really mattered to him. African started raising a German shepherd named Scout, and she became his loyal companion. In the mornings, he and Scout would go for walks around the woods near their house. It reminded him of the peaceful days before his life became chaotic. He no longer thought much about Michelle. She was a part of the past, a part that was no longer important in his current life. The past was gone, and now he just wanted to build a new life, a life without betrayal, without cheating, and without pain. As the years passed, African began to feel a change in himself. The pain of the past no longer invaded his mind. Although he still thought about Michelle from time to time, he now understood that his life could not stop just because of a broken relationship. He has learned to look at the future more positively. Although sometimes old memories still come back, he no longer feels controlled by them. With stability in his work and personal life, African has begun to find joy in the little things. He participates in community activities, helps people around him, and feels that he is truly valuable. He is no longer the man of the past, who only knows how to sacrifice and endure. He is a free man, who can control his life and follow the path he has chosen. African has returned to a completely new life. His new home in Missoula, Montana, is small but full and airy. The walls no longer have sad memories or betrayal from Michelle. With each passing day, he feels more clearly that this is a new beginning that he deserves. Since he started working as a carpenter, he has not only learned new skills but also found joy in simple tasks. He no longer has to face crises or pain every time he wakes up. His life is no longer tied to dangerous military missions, but instead is simple manual work, helping him create useful items for the community. In the afternoons, he and Scout walk together in the forest, enjoying the fresh air where there is no trace of betrayal or suffering. But he also knows that what he is living now is not what he could have had without the difficult decisions he made in the past. He has faced his past, overcome great challenges, and now he is living a new life, a life he built from the ruins of himself. African has not only grown up during his days in Missoula, but he also understands himself more than ever. Even without Michelle by his side, he realized that growth came not from clinging to old relationships, but from understanding his own worth and accepting what had happened. He no longer lived in the past, and he no longer felt afraid of the future. One morning, as he was drinking coffee and looking out the window, he received a call from James, his friend and former lawyer. James informed him that everything had been settled financially. Michelle had been held accountable for her fraudulent actions, and other military families had received money from asset restitution. "Thank you for all you have done, African. This is not just about you. It is about helping a lot of other families in the same situation," James said over the phone. African chuckled. He was not happy that the lawsuit was over, but rather that the truth had been revealed and justice had been served. He didn't have to face those who lied to him, didn't have to prove himself right anymore. The most important thing was that he kept his determination and didn't give up. African's life gradually became peaceful, but not a boring peace. In the following months, he participated in community activities in Missoula, helping people around him and feeling useful. The manual work taught him many lessons, and he also found joy in creating beautiful, useful items for others. The friendships he made with the locals helped him feel integrated and no longer feel lonely as before. He no longer had to live in the shadow of the past, and he felt proud of what he had done. He also began to participate in volunteer activities, helping families in need, especially military families. He wanted to give back what he had received from life, and he wanted to make sure that others did not have to go through the same pain as he had. This gave him a sense of satisfaction and peace. African's life gradually became peaceful, but not a boring peace. In the following months, he participated in community activities in Missoula, helping people around him and feeling useful. The manual work taught him many lessons, and he also found joy in creating beautiful, useful items for others. The friendships he made with the locals helped him feel integrated and no longer feel lonely as before. He no longer had to live in the shadow of the past, and he felt proud of what he had done. He also began to participate in volunteer activities, helping families in need, especially military families. He wanted to give back what he had received from life, and he wanted to make sure that others did not have to go through the same pain he had experienced. This gave him a sense of satisfaction and peace. A year after that event, African decided to sell his small cabin in Missoula and move to a new place. Not because he did not like it there, but because he felt it was time for him to broaden his horizons, to seek new opportunities to continue to develop himself. He had built a solid foundation, and now it was time for him to start looking for a new path. Before leaving, he wrote a letter to James, thanking him for always being there for him, helping him through all the challenges. He also sent a letter to Michelle, a letter not to blame, but to say goodbye. "Thank you for everything," he wrote. "Although everything that happened between us was painful, I learned a lot from what happened. Now I will move on." African has let go of old memories, but he has not forgotten the lessons that life has taught him. He knows that life is never easy, but with each new day, he has the opportunity to reinvent himself and find happiness. African's story is not only a journey of overcoming betrayal, but also a journey of self-discovery. He overcame great challenges, bounced back from shocks, and eventually rebuilt his life. This is a story of perseverance, resilience, and mastery of life. Although he lost a lot, he found strength from those losses to live a free and hopeful life. African not only won the legal battle, but also won the battle with himself. In the end, he realized that nothing is more important than being true to himself, finding his purpose in life, and not letting the pain of the past control the future.